one out this way here.
Is this a hockey puck?
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah. You just whip it at people if they get out of line. Dolores is in the bathroom too, so.
Okay. Oh,
We'll
maybe
get-
that's
we'll
why
give
you
it-
went the other way. Okay. Oh, okay. We'll be ready.
Who's in the back?
Not yet, no.
You're talking about the
There.
woman that's drinking out of the red can? What about her?
That's right.
Oh, she did? Oh,
One
maybe
of the
she'll be here for the night for it too.
That's what I'm
30,
thinking.
20
Okay.
cameras?
Oh, good memory.
No. How come you're, oh, you're late, is it? Where's your button? Oh, it is on, okay.
So, for the, there, I see it. Okay, I'm gonna try it. Okay, now can we begin?
Now we can.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Fridley City Council meeting. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And just as a reminder, we all have cell phones. Please turn them off or at least on vibrate so they don't disrupt the proceedings. Thank you. The first item on tonight's agenda is the usual proposed consent agenda items, which will be given by our city manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. First item on our consent agenda this evening is the city council minutes for November 13th. We have under old and new business, a second reading of an ordinance repealing City Code Chapter 3 Personnel in its entirety and adopting a new Chapter 3 Personnel, and adopting official title and summary ordinance. And finally, the resolution authorizing the city manager to formulate and execute administrative policies, rules, and regulations for the employment and approving the non-union employees' paid holiday and annual leave. We have approval of the City of Fridley Energy Action Plan and approval of a first amendment to Tower Site Lease Agreement with NCW PCS MPL 31-year Site Tower Holdings LLC. And we have claims for P-card and regular bills. And that is our agenda, our consent agenda, Your Honor.
Okay, and with that acronym, I'm sure everybody knows what that one was. Are there any of these proposed consent agenda items that the council wishes to remove for further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove number 3.
Or would you like to place it?
How about after the public hearing?
Okay, so 7A.
Yes, please.
Item 3. Any persons in the audience that wish to remove any of the proposed consent agenda items other than item 3 that's already been removed for further discussion or consideration?
If none, with the removal of item 3 and placing it at 7A, I would move approval of the proposed consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed, the motion carries. Next item is open forum. Are there any persons in the audience that wish to address the council on an item out there that not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none and hearing none, we'll move on. Motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
Move the adoption of the agenda with the addition of 7A.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed, the motion also carries. Now, under public hearings, item number 6, consider revision and adding language to the Fridley City Code, Chapter 220, and the first reading of an ordinance of amending Chapter 220.
Move to open the public hearing and waive the reading.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed, the motion also carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This evening, we will discuss an item that you may recall you had, before you had a workshop not so very long ago. And this is an item that we're very proud of. Our Pat Wolf and Lieutenant Jeff Guest and the police staff have really done a very, very nice job of pulling this together. And let me just explain some of the details for you. There was an internal staff review and discussion of our Chapter 220. 220, as you know, is our rental housing code. And involved with those meetings also was the attorney from our legal staff, Bridget Nason. And Bridget did a very nice job, we believe, of reviewing the ordinance and the intent and getting the words right so that the ordinance before you we're very, very comfortable with tonight. Preparation of the draft revised ordinance for introduction to council and council feedback was necessary, and you'll recall that Chief Wirke did a very nice job of presenting this in that workshop meeting. And you might recall also in that discussion, Chief Wirke and our Community Development Department really had a good collaborative history on putting this together and making a product that works well for both our rental inspections and also the behavior portions of the rental code, Chapter 220. Summarizing the proposed revisions, I would say that the updated references and updated language were a very, very important part of this. Also, updated licensing and application requirements were a part of this, and a revised process for addressing licensing and management issues were also cleaned up as part of this amendment process. Rental licenses are required for rental dwellings, rental dwelling units. Some of this language was touched up a bit. A dwelling or a dwelling unit and accessory structure, if any, let for rent or lease. Let, the definition to permit possession or occupancy of a dwelling or a dwelling unit, whether or not compensation is paid by a person who is not the legal owner of the record thereof, pursuant to written or unwritten lease. This is an important part. You might think that this is something that, wouldn't that be intuitive? Wouldn't you know that? Wouldn't you understand that? We have to assume that the average reader of the ordinance needs to have it clearly defined. We need to then, in essence, put those words down on paper so that it's very clear. It leaves any room for interpretation out and makes it certainly easy to follow. What are licensed exemptions? We made sure that in this ordinance, as they reviewed it and modified it, that it was very clear what would be exempt. Hotels, for example, motels, hospitals, residential care facilities, assisted living, nursing homes, and single-family homes are duplexes in which the owner resides in a portion of that single-family home or duplex. The rental license requirements and process was clearly defined through this set of amendments. The rental license application, it's valid for 12 months from the date of issuance, requires an inspection and annual fee. Updated inspection and related language was paid attention to in this and modified somewhat. The appointment of a designated agent if owner does not reside within the 11 county metropolitan area was an important piece. Inclusion of a crime-free, drug-free lease addendum was an important piece. Completion by the licensee or manager of the crime-free rental housing program, and also requirements for licensees to address incidents of illegal or disorderly conduct on the licensed premises. Adverse licensing action, a violation of the terms and conditions of a rental license, let's say it was a behavior issue, and a number of opportunities to correct may lead to suspension, revocation, or a conversion to a provisional license process whereby there would be a mitigation plan to make sure that behavior isn't something that we're seeing repeated or bad behavior is something that's not being repeated in a complex, and so a mitigation plan would assure that that things could be taken care of there and corrected if necessary. What are the next steps? Tonight, the council is being asked to hold a public hearing to receive comments and if appropriate, and staff would recommend, yes, that it is, to approve the first reading of the attached ordinance number 220 as submitted in your packet. With that, that concludes my presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions you've got. Pat Wolf, our manager of the rental housing program, Lieutenant Guest of the police department, Chief Werke, and I are also here to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hickok. The council have any questions?
Mr. Mayor, who wants to address, maybe just a little more background, how much time was spent on this, and, because we know there's some other cities that have had some questions and comments and related to changing their ordinance, but maybe a little more background in why we are where we are today, so whoever wants to handle
Sure.
that question.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Balcom, if I could, Lieutenant Guest and Pat Wolf, maybe you would like to explain a little bit about the process for us this evening. I think it's been an impressive process. I think it's one that council you're going to find you're very, very comfortable with, but maybe if you wouldn't mind stepping to the podium and just discussing a little bit about what your process was and the kind of time that has been spent on this and so forth. Great, thank you.
And maybe even, Scott, just another little background, how it became that this is all part of the planning and redevelopment, and how that whole piece versus where it used to be done more by our fire department and some of those inspections, and why we kind of combined that might be even beneficial for the public to know
Sure.
why that happened.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Balcom, if I could take the second part first and then
Yep,
I'll hand
yep.
off to Pat, that would be great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. The Community Development Department now for 4 years has been in charge of the rental inspection program. Prior to that, all the way back to 1993, the fire department was in charge of inspections for their rental division. We, through the process, really determined that though they worked hard and did their work on inspections, what would really make it most efficient is combining the community development efforts, having the rental inspection with the folks that the rental inspectors were visiting with on a regular basis to compare notes with the building official, for example, and the code enforcement people. It was really a much more efficient process and a much more efficient dynamic to put that group together in one setting. And we have found great success. Pat Wolf has managed the program for community development as it is with the rental inspections. And we are very, very pleased with the work that can happen and the collaboration that can happen by having the building department, by having the code enforcement folks, really the planning folks, and rental inspections together under one roof. So with that, I'd like to hand it to Pat, and she can tell you more about the process.
Mr. Mayor and Council, back in 2017, Chief Werke brought to our attention, there were some concerns that were brought to his attention through the commission. I believe it was a survey. And there were some concerns from the citizens about their safety around rental properties. So we got together at the request of Chief Werke and our Community Development Director, Scott Hickok, to start to review the ordinance and how we can make it better if it's outdated. So what they did is the police department, there was a conduct section in chapter 220 that probably hadn't been used as frequently as it could have been. And with Chief Werke's direction, he wanted to start to use this conduct section in chapter 220. Being a rental inspector since 1986, I saw the need for it as well. I have never felt unsafe during a rental inspection, but I think things have, not feeling safe now. Turn it in, okay. But times are changing. You know, I think it's been brought to our attention through Lieutenant Guest and other officers. There seems to be a little bit more crime in our rental properties than there has been in the past. I think just in the short time that we have worked together with this new group, we're seeing changes really fast. We're seeing landlords responding, we're seeing tenants responding, and we're starting to look at how can we make all of us safer, the tenants, the landlords, the community. So this process started in 2017. We met as a group. It also included the fire department, and we discussed how can we change Chapter 220. It was outdated in many ways. For example, carbon monoxide detectors weren't even addressed in Chapter 220, so we had to update it and become more current. We had to come up with language that applied to different hazards that we haven't seen in the past. You know, I can speak to the licensing part and the inspection part, and I think the police department, whether it be Chief Weirkey or Lieutenant Guest, could speak directly to what they saw was outdated in the conduct section, which is more or less the area that they would cover.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Bolcom, Ms. Wolf is absolutely right. We saw a concern a few years ago, and we wanted to address it. Really, from the police department standpoint, this was all about partnerships for us. You know, we really wanted to use our resources as we had retirements and we restructured our police department. We put more resources into our rental housing in Fridley. And it was really about partnerships where Lieutenant Guest can call most apartment owners and landlords by their first name and let them know what's going on in their properties. They can call us if they need anything. And so we're really wanting to open those lines of communications. And with that, we are seeing a decline in rental. We don't have anything quantitative that we can point out. It would take weeks, if not months, to go through our reports and figure out which one's rentals and which ones are not. But the conduct is getting better. We're helping. So, you know, if we have somebody that is acting out and causing a lot of problems, we're trying to help the landlords so they're not moving from one building to the next in Fridley. And we're communicating and partnering with them. And so far, we're seeing a great success with that. And I give a lot of credit to Pat Wolf here and Lieutenant Guest and Courtney Miller, who could not be here, with making these changes that really bring us up to 2018. And this was done in 1993. They took a lot of stuff from other cities and put them in here and really brought it up to speed, and we're very proud of this product.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. So before I open it up to the public, this is a public hearing. I just want to know if there's any other questions from council. Hearing none. It is a public hearing, and those in the public that wish to speak on this issue, if you'll just come up to the podium, just give me your name and where you reside, and let us know what you think about this change in the ordinance. Anybody? I don't see anybody wanting to jump up, so it must be a good ordinance. They've really written it well, right? If there's no other comment and no questions from the council, I suggest that the motion be in order to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
A motion, we have a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor? Aye. And those opposed? Motion carries. Well, they don't always go that smooth, but that's just fine if they do. So,
Mr. Mayor,
thank you for all your work.
whoops, if it's so in order, I move the first reading of the ordinance under section 12.06 of the city charter and Minnesota statute section 465.035 regarding certain real estate and authorizing the conveyance thereof, found on pages 50. Oh, maybe I did the wrong one.
Yes, you did.
Sorry. Let's go back. Let's start over. Okay, naughty. If it's so in order, I move the first reading of an ordinance amending chapter 220 of the Fridley City Code related to the residential rental property maintenance and licensing code found on pages 52 through 86. And thank you, Mr. Safety.
Right. Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any other final discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? And the motion carries. Item number 7, also under a public hearing, consider transferring property to the City of Fridley Housing and Redevelopment Authority to facilitate the redevelopment of our old Fridley Municipal Building, as well as a first reading of an ordinance on the same issue. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing and waive the reading?
So moved.
All right, that was quick. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, the motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. This is an item for consideration that you would transfer the property of the city of Fridley to the HRA. City's HRA right now is in an exclusive negotiation with the Ivy Properties and AmCon to redevelop our old municipal center site. The idea would be Ivy and AmCon are interested in constructing a 134-unit senior building for Ebenezer Homes. Ebenezer, as you might know, is the residential arm of Fairview Health Systems. The old municipal center site contains land owned by both the city and its HRA. The HRA is requesting that all of the property be put in the HRA's name to simplify facilitating for that redevelopment. Ivy and AmCon are paying a fair market value of $2.2 million for the property. Demolition and other extraordinary costs incurred by Dunbar, Dunbar as part of Ivy Development, will be credited towards the sales price. HRA actual costs will be deducted and the remaining funds passed on to the city. The authority will adopt a resolution on December 6th detailing these items. The deal is structured in a very typical way. You might recognize this was the same way that the Cielo development was structured, where it was a land sale with some deduction taken for improvements they made on the site. There is no indebtedness on the property. In other words, we own it outright through the city and the HRA. To give you a little bit of a sense of the site, the city owns lot 6, and then lots 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and block 1. HRA owns lot 7, 15, 16 of block 1, lot 2. We've highlighted the separate parcels. The kind of pink-colored boundary is the HRA-owned property. The blue-colored boundary is the city-owned property. Staff recommends a motion to hold the public hearing, which you don't need the motion for, but and a first reading of the proposed ordinance of the sale and transfer of the city property to the Fridley HRA for redevelopment. Second reading, if this is approved this evening for first reading, second reading would take place on December 10th. Again, remember, the HRA is kind of your redevelopment arm, and this basically is enabling the HRA to take the land for that redevelopment purpose and recognize the square up of the property and all its associated funds at such time as it's proper and the deal has been done. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions, and would thank you for your time.
Thank you again, Mr. Hickok. Does council have any questions?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Hickok, what's the demolition cost? Do we have any idea what the cost will be?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Balcom, it's a good question, but they have not had the demolition bids come in yet. They have done the soil borings on the site, and they have taken a look at the building just from a early demolition perspective, but their bids would tell us actually what those costs are going to be.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so do we think there's any type of hazardous material there that'll have to be disposed of? I'm just kind of curious. I mean, it's 2.2, but.
Sure.
But the city and the HRA are incurring the cost of demolition, correct? Is that
Yes.
correct?
If I could borrow a quote from a developer that has done a lot of development in Fridley, I'll be surprised if we're not surprised. You know, there's always something. There's always a little bit of something that they find. But the reality of it is we think it's a relatively clean site. Probably one of the most complicated things that you'll find on that site is we have a post-tension parking deck. And the deconstruction of a post-tension parking deck takes experts. It's not an easy task for them to do. And so where you might just think that most of that site would be fairly easy to bulldoze, the one thing that won't be is a post-tension deck that they will have to systematically take apart in order to release the tension first in the deck and then demolish after that.
And then if this goes through tonight in the second reading, when do we see demolition there, just for the viewing public?
The developer would like to demolish during the winter months so that when spring comes, they would be ready for development. And certainly demolition during the winter does some good things, like even helping contain dust in some cases.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Well, that was kind of the question I asked, that if once it's taken down, when would they begin construction? You think it'd be next spring or next summer possibly?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Barnett, they're very, very anxious.
Good.
They see 2019 as a great construction season for them, and I think the earlier the better is what they
Yeah.
would see in terms of getting started.
That's good.
If there's no other questions from council, this is also a public hearing, so persons in the audience, if you wish to come speak, come to the podium and introduce yourself and tell us what's on your mind. I assume by the lack of this, people came here for the water rates?
They're all here for the energy report.
Yeah, okay, the energy report. There's no other questions or comments from the audience? Going once, twice, 3 times?
Mr. Mayor, if it's so in order, I move to close the public hearing.
Second?
There's a motion, there's a second. If there's no further discussion by council, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries. I think it's a positive, good thing that the market's good, so that the property's gonna sell fairly quickly. We're gonna see some new facility there in the next year or so. So the next thing is item number 7A, which was removed from,
No,
Mr. Mayor?
first reading,
If
first,
it-
Oh,
the one I
sorry.
tried to read before.
okay, that's
If
right.
it's so in order, I move an ordinance under section 12.06 of the city charter and Minnesota statutes, section 465.035, regarding certain real estate and authorizing the conveyance thereof, found on page 90.
Second?
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? The motion carries. Now, for 7A, which was previously removed from consent, Councilmember Balcom.
I just want to hear the report.
Okay,
Good evening, council members. I am here tonight to present the City of Fridley's Energy Action Plan. The impetus for this plan came through the city's involvement in the Green Step Cities Best Practices Program, as well as through the 2040 Comprehensive Planning process. During the 2040 Comprehensive Planning process, the Metropolitan Council asked the city to identify ways in order to increase the city's resiliency. We also heard numerous comments from the public asking the city what we were doing to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and reduce our energy consumption. Apart from the global, larger scale question of energy use, reducing energy consumption is important on a local level because there are significant costs associated with energy bills, with energy use. Everyone in the audience here probably pays an energy bill. Furthermore, reducing energy use promotes cleaner air. More energy efficient buildings tend to be more comfortable to live and work in, as well as can be safer due to improved lighting. And energy efficient buildings also have higher resale values. So for these reasons, the city thought that this was a really important endeavor to undertake. However, developing an energy action plan is a very big process. There's a lot of data to look through. There are a lot of different approaches to take. And so we looked for a partnership to help us through this process and found that through Excel Energy's Partners in Energy program. This process is designed to help communities develop localized, community-specific energy action plans. To start off this program, we developed an energy action team comprised of Fridley staff, residents, businesses, and institutions. While it's not a public hearing, we do have members of the energy action team here in the audience who maybe want to give a little wave, who are here in support of the plan tonight. And through the Partners in Energy program, we were guided through a 5-workshop planning series to help us develop what the community's energy vision, mission, and goals would be. The Energy Action Team represented a really wide group of opinions and diverse perspectives from the community, and there was a lot of really good discussion that came through these meetings. The first workshops focused on the city's baseline energy use so that we could best understand what strategies would work here in the city. We found that while the majority of customers came from the residential sector, the majority of electrical and natural gas consumption came from our commercial and industrial sectors. Over 80% of the energy consumed in the city of Fridley is consumed within the commercial and industrial, commercial and industrial properties. Excel also broke down for us what the average customer was spending on natural gas and electricity. We found that while this could vary greatly between different users, the average Fridley resident pays $771 per year on electricity and $677 per year on gas. So this is a pretty sizable amount that people are spending year after year, and it's an equity issue. Everyone pays an energy bill, and so the proportion of income that lower income residents are spending on energy is much higher. Commercial and industrial properties on average are spending over $20,000 on electricity per year. So this is a real cost that can affect bottom lines, can affect the ability to expand, to hire new workers. And if we can help bring those costs down for our businesses, we can help them succeed. We also looked at what programs Fridley residents and businesses and institutions were currently participating in, and in the residential sector, we found that 9 in 100 premises are currently participating in an Excel energy conservation program already. So this could be having participated in a home energy squad visit or a new construction rebate. And the results of this participation is a 0.9% savings on total energy use as compared to if these residents had not participated in the programs. So while we do have a fair number of people participating, there is a lot of room for improvement and getting the word out to get even more people tapped into these savings. From the commercial sector, 7 in 50 premises are participating in the program. So we're also seeing here there's a range of programs with untapped opportunities, and that we can increase education and awareness related to these programs so that our commercial partners can participate. We also looked at the ways Fridley residents and businesses were interacting with the renewable energy programs such as WindSource, which allows residents and businesses to subscribe to wind-based energy, as well as on-site solar, among other examples. So based on building permits in 2017, only 2 Fridley residents installed solar panels and only 1 commercial property installed solar panels. Based on the baseline data, we were guided through a series of activities to help us determine what our energy vision and mission would be. We knew that we wanted the city to be a leader, that we wanted to involve all sectors of the community, and that we really wanted to focus on saving money so that Fridley remains an affordable community to live and work in, as well as maintained a high quality of life. So the energy vision that was developed for Fridley was that we will continue leading by example and engaging residents, businesses, and institutions to save money and reduce greenhouse gas emissions for the benefit of everyone in the community. For the mission, in order to achieve our community-wide goals, we focused on increasing sustainable, reliable energy in the grid, strengthening energy-efficient practices and participation, and supporting innovative strategies and technology to achieve our energy vision. For a community-wide goal, we set the benchmark of 5% energy reduction by 2020 compared to business as usual, and 20% energy reduction by 2030. We will achieve these goals by focusing on 4 key areas: residential energy, which is inclusive of homeowners and renters, but with a specific focus on under-resourced residents, businesses and multifamily, which includes multifamily apartments of over 5 units, institutions, which would include city-owned properties, as well as worship facilities, medical facilities, and such, and transportation and electric vehicles. Within each of those categories, we weave elements of renewable energy as well. Our 2020 goals include Fridley residents taking 1,200 additional actions toward energy conservation and renewable energy. These would take place in forms of the rebates that were previously shown, which allows us to track how we're achieving that goal. That businesses and multifamily will achieve 5% energy savings by 2020, institutions 5% energy savings, an outreach campaign to raise awareness about electric vehicles, and installing 1 electric vehicle charging station at a city-owned building. By 2030, we set the goal that Fridley residents will reduce total energy use by 10%, as well as a 20% reduction for businesses and multifamily and a 15% reduction for institutions. The key strategies that we'll use to get there, which go into further detail within the Energy Action Plan, are providing informational materials through city communication channels, leveraging existing city relationships and programs to provide targeted support, and coordinating with our building department and development review committee to integrate information about energy efficiency and renewable energy into the development process. We expect that this plan will result in a combined energy savings for the city of over $3 million by 2020. Participating households are expected to save $52 per year on their energy bill, and that combined with the decarbonization of the electric grid, there will be a greenhouse gas emission reduction of 30% by 2030. And as a side benefit, we expect that this outreach will result in new partnerships and active engagement from community members. Following approval of the Energy Action Plan, the Partners in Energy program transitions into an 18-month implementation implementation period. During this time, we'll receive support through the Partners in Energy program with regards to marketing and communications, data tracking and measurement, program expertise, and project management. So we'll have that really technical support that these leaders in energy conservation can provide us, as well as the ability to actually track what the changes are in the city's electricity consumption and natural gas consumption. At this time, I'd like to answer any questions you might have about the city's Energy Action Plan, as well as to invite 2 guests to the podium, Yvonne Pfeiffer, the Community Energy Efficiency Manager with Excel, and Marissa Baer, the Community Energy Planner working with the city from Center for Energy and Environment.
Great, thank you, Ms. Workin. Good evening, thanks for coming.
I'm Yvonne Pfeiffer with Excel Energy.
And I'm Marissa Baer, Partners in Energy Community Facilitator.
Great, did the council have any questions? No?
No, I just think it's an awesome program and what a great collaboration between so we're excited to see what's gonna be happening and all the new ideas. And thanks for the group here that worked
Yeah,
hard, so.
thank you
You should
all.
come up to the podium and let everyone see who you are,
Yeah,
that you worked on this project. Come on, stand up, don't be shy. Put it on the,
We have members from the Fridley Public as well as the Environmental Quality and Energy Commission here tonight. Members of the EQEC were very important in getting this plan off the ground, and we're very thankful for
We
their
give them all
support.
a hand.
awesome.
so I do have a question, though. How did you arrive at 20%, at a 20% reduction in your goals for 2030? I mean, why not 18%? Why not 25%? Was it just something that was statistically calibrated, or was it just a goal that you thought was achievable?
Sure. Marissa, I don't know if you would like to talk a little bit about Center for Energy and Environment's process in facilitating the workshops and what we went through, how we went through the process together.
Of course. So, Mr. Mayor, council members, so part of the Partners in Energy offering is to have a very data-driven and community-driven process. So, as Rachel noted, part of the planning workshops is we looked at historical baseline energy consumption data and working with some of the Energy Action Team members here tonight, as well as the rest of the Energy Action Team members, modeled out what would be achievable for the city of Fridley based on historical participation, and then as well as achieving those kind of shorter-term 2020 goals to where they would get. We did, in one of our workshops, a pretty thorough exercise of, are we hitting the mark or should we go a little bit more ambitious? And that's where that 20% came from, is with kind of historical participation actions that we think we'll be able to achieve got us to, I believe, about 14%. And the group thought the group should be a little more ambitious, and that the city of Fridley, the community, engaging the residents, the businesses would be able to shoot for that 20%.
Okay, so what came to my mind, and probably I'm, putting somebody on the spot here, because you probably don't have that level of detail, but, so I'm just thinking, between now and 2030, another decade, and if everybody had every light bulb in their house changed to an LED, which is, quite a bit less energy use, a reduction of like 86% from an incandescent bulb, what would the savings be right there alone? 2%, 10%? So I knew I'd put somebody on the spot, but.
That is a difficult one because it does based on usage and changes at the home and.
Well, given all things equal, the reason why I bring that point up, because changing light bulbs is a pretty easy thing, right?
Right.
And I don't know if that's, if that even puts a small dent in the equation as far as energy savings, reduction.
It does.
I would think
it's
so, but-
really a good place to start.
Okay,
I might add, if I may, that I know that LED bulbs cost a little bit more, but you save the money because they last like forever.
Right.
yeah, but like everything, even like TVs, they're going, the cost is getting down there quite a bit.
Yeah.
So,
One other thing, if I may, Rachel, maybe you could introduce your committee because so often, people that are on these commissions don't get the credit that they deserve, and the general public doesn't know who they are. So could you introduce them, please?
Or they can
Or-
Well, let them come up and introduce themselves.
Okay, you could do that too.
yeah.
Mayor Lund, Councilmember Safety, I'd like to introduce invite members of our Energy Action Team to introduce themselves.
Well, Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm Mark Hansen. I'm the chair of the Environmental and Energy and Quality Commission.
Yeah, great.
And I'm Nick Olberding. I'm co-chair of the same commission.
Great.
I am Heidi Ferris, and I serve on the EQEC.
Hi, I'm Justin Full, and I serve on the Environmental Quality and Energy Commission.
My name is Amy Drees, and I am a resident of Fridley.
I want to thank you all.
Thank
for,
you all is
your-
right.
Hey, Rachel, one more quick
involvement.
question. So what do you think after the adoption of this tonight, what might people start seeing in the next 3 months, 6 months? What do you see happening besides everyone changing their bulbs, if that's something they can do, so.
Mayor Lund, Councilmember Volka, the next step, as part of this process, we've developed an implementation plan that breaks out scheduled activities amongst the 18 months of the implementation plan by quarter. So residents should expect to see a lot of increased communication related to energy efficiency, which we'll be developing in conjunction with Excel and Center for Energy and Environment and our own communications department. We'll be looking at a bunch of different communication channels to get the word out. We'll also be focusing on outreach at events such as the Environmental Fun Fair hosted at Springbrook Nature Center and other events at Springbrook, including a dinner as part of their Discovery Dinner series with one of the experts on electric vehicles, which will be occurring in February. We'll also be working on integrating information into our Development Review Committee process, into the building permits, and other outreach channels from the city. So it should be great, hopefully.
Thank you.
I have one more question, if I may.
Sure.
Do you know if anybody is going to install charging stations for electric cars?
Mayor Lund, Councilmember Safety. So the city has applied for a grant through the MPCA for an electric vehicle charging station at our civic campus, which we're waiting to hear about. And depending on that outcome, we'll continue to apply for other potential funding sources. Excel Energy is also piloting some new rate structures and experimenting with that to support electric vehicle users. And Yvonne, I'm not sure if you're able to speak to that program in any more detail, but.
Not in detail. We've actually filed for the rate. We have not heard back yet. So once we hear back, we will be putting more information out there for residents and businesses.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, once again, thank you all for joining us this evening, and thanks for the presentation, Ms. Workin, and for everybody involved. It was great.
Thank you.
Okay, now we can move on to new business.
Should I make a motion to approve this City of
Oh,
Fridley
yeah, I guess
Energy
you're right.
Action
We
Plan?
took it off, didn't we?
Yeah.
Sure.
Found on
Trying to
pages
rush
18
through
and
this.
19. I made a motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion, there was a section to approve the City of Fridley's Energy Action Plan. Hearing no other questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed, the motion carries. And now on to new business, item number 8, which is a resolution providing for water, sewer, stormwater, and recycling rate changes for next year. That was too quick for him.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and for the patience while we were getting the presentation together. Excuse me. This evening, I'm just going to go over some kind of introduction and background about our enterprise funds and our recycling fund, and then just do kind of a quick overview of our water utility, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and the solid waste abatement, which colloquially we refer to as the recycling fund. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll just outline some of the next steps. So just some introduction and background for the council and members of the public. Unlike the general fund, the water and sanitary sewer and storm sewer funds are enterprise funds, meaning that their expenditures and obligations are established through user fees and other charges for services. And much like our general fund, they maintain a minimum 6-month operating balance for expenditures, including depreciation in the system. And as has been discussed at length recently with the utility rate study, ideally these enterprise funds should support the entire cost of their capital improvements. The one thing we always like to stress when we have this discussion is that these rates are often the subject of external costs and pressures, most notably in the sanitary sewer fund. The Metropolitan Council Environmental Services does charge a wastewater transmission and treatment charges, and as we've talked about many times, those charges make up approximately 70% of the expenditures of that particular fund. And to support these costs and maintain the required stable fund balances, we review and consider changes to the rate structure annually. So, in addition, we often regularly commission third-party reviews of the various systems, and as I mentioned recently, the city did review the water and sanitary sewer funds with the city's financial advisors, Ellers, and they did provide several modifications to our rate and fee structures. And generally, those modifications were designed to accomplish two principal goals. The first, to provide stable and predictable modifications in the rates and fee structure over time, and then also, as I mentioned, to maintain appropriate balances and limit the need for additional debt or borrowing to support capital expenditures. So with kind of that history in mind, I will just kind of walk through each fund generally. Just first, earlier this year, the council at a conference meeting did review the water and sewer funds in greater detail. So some of this may look a little repeated, but on that analysis, we actually determined that the water utility fund was not meeting revenue projections. We were coming up short based on the Eller study by about $100,000. And with that in mind, we do know that the fund continues to rely on the use of bond proceeds to fund certain projects. And as discussed in the conference meeting earlier today, we are planning on issuing water utility revenue bonds next year to support certain water-related projects. And generally, though, we have found that the current usage and revenue patterns are equitable, and that has been consistent with the philosophy that was established by the council. You'll recall that one of the main tenets of the Eller study was to ensure that water usage and water revenue aligned by class. So ultimately, this evening, the resolution before the council does recommend an increase in the water volume rates between 3% and 6%, depending upon the user class, and there is an attachment included with your memo that outlines the various changes, and that is designed to offset that loss of revenue. We're also recommending an increase in the quarterly base fee of $2 and $5, again, depending on user class, and that is also outlined in the revenue, in the chart attached to your memorandum this evening. The one thing I would just like to call your attention to, as you can see in the budget chart, we are planning significant expenditures for 2019. As mentioned, we do have a water treatment plant and then also some distribution system projects, and we are planning to issue bond proceeds. So when you do look at the cash balances for the fund, it's always important to call out those use of bond proceeds. So we are supporting our long-term expenditures right now. Can you not hear me? Is it
That's right,
a little better?
yes.
I can pull a little closer.
I don't know, can people in the audience hear okay?
Is that a little,
That's much better.
okay.
Yeah, they can't hear you in the back.
I will pull it even closer then.
There we
How's
go.
that?
That's
All
better.
right. Moving into the sanitary sewer utility fund, based on the analysis that the city has performed to date, we are anticipating that fund to exceed its revenue projections. Although at this point in time, and as discussed in our conference meeting earlier today, we still are anticipating the use of bond proceeds to support ordinary capital expenditures. And as discussed earlier in this presentation, it's always important to understand what the Metropolitan Council environmental service charges are for the upcoming year. They do make up about approximately 70% of the expenditure funds of the expenditures for this fund, and we have been advised by Metropolitan Council that those charges will be increasing by 9.2% for next year. They're also planning 4% increases in the out years. So any changes in those rates does cause us to review very carefully the sanitary sewer charges. So to maintain the viability of the fund, and again, as we've talked about before, limit the need for future borrowing, we are recommending that the City Council increase the sanitary sewer volume rate by 4.4%. But in recognition of the fact that the fund is currently exceeding its revenue projections, we are recommending that the council not increase the base fees for either the residential or multifamily units, meaning 3 units or less. For the larger multifamily units and the commercial industrial, we are recommending an increase in the base fees. And similar to the water utility, you can see here in the sanitary sewer fund, we have had more success over time increasing the cash balances to support ongoing operations and capital expenditures. But in 2019, we still are assuming the use of bond proceeds. So much of that uptick for 19 is the result of the city borrowing. And then just as an exercise for the, give a better understanding of what these rate changes mean for water and sewer users, what we have here is gallons used 12,000. We characterize this kind of as our medium user. And you can see right now the change would be about 3.26% across both of the water and sewer utility funds. It's important to mention that we run this scenario for a variety of types of users, and the changes from a low volume user would be about 2.96% to our highest commercial industrial user would be about 5%. So again, the range 3 to 5% increase, but since we are holding those base fees flat for this year, the lower users do experience a lower increase than the rest of the user classes. In addition to water and sewer, we also operate a stormwater utility. Based on the analysis we've done, the stormwater is meeting revenue projections, and the city actually contributes fund balance for future needs. So this fund is in fact self-sustaining. As I mentioned in the conference meeting, it's something of a model for the other 2 funds, something we hope that they eventually look like. And one of the good news here is we do not foresee any need for additional borrowing for any activities that are planned through 2023. So based on those anticipated expenditures, and very importantly to maintain the self-sustainability of this fund, we still are recommending an increase in the stormwater utility fee of 3.5%, which does work out to about 32 cents per residential lot per quarter. So again, as you can see, much similar to this chart, similar to the previous enterprise funds, the cash balances are increasing and will give the city the opportunity to fund major capital improvements with cash as opposed to issuing debt. Candidly, this table is a little hard to see, but annually the city participates in a review of storm, water, and sewer funds, and they provide us with the survey results. And so you can see here a comparison of metropolitan municipalities. And just for everyone's benefit, you can see right there, the city of Fridley, kind of right smack dab in the middle. We rank 17th out of the 30 participating municipalities. So our water, sewer, and stormwater rates aggregated are competitive with the surrounding metropolitan area, at least in the sample provided here. And if anyone would like a copy of this particular chart, I can certainly provide it so it's easier to read. But since we don't produce it, it's a little more difficult to kind of manipulate for council's review. And then lastly, we have what I've often said is my fund that has my favorite name, the Solid Waste Abatement Fund, which we also just call the Recycling Fund. And based on our review and the commodity values of certain recyclable materials, we are anticipating a need for additional revenue to support the current service levels. And it's important to stress in this particular area, the costs that are being incurred are beyond the control of the city. This really has much more to do with the commodity markets as it relates to recyclable materials. And so we are recommending an increase in the solid waste abatement fee by 10% or about 0.82 cents, 82 cents per quarter. The one thing to stress here is that the recycling services contract makes up about 83 to 84% of the expenditures for this fund. So any shifts in those costs certainly, again, much like Metropolitan Council, causes us to take a long, hard look at the rates that are being charged. But again, you can see here that the recycling fund has been relatively stable over time, and we are maintaining our cash balances, and we are anticipating that increase to support the additional costs of the recycling services contract. So with that, assuming the City Council supports these recommended modifications, staff does recommend that you adopt the resolution found on page 93 and 94 of the agenda packet. And I'd also like to mention that assuming approval, these rates would be effective for the first billing cycle of 2019. So with that, I'd be, excuse me, happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you for the presentation. The council have questions? Well, we had a little bit of discussion with that in the conference before the council meeting, and there was expressed some concerns about the ever-increasing water sewer rates. But we also understand that the alternatives, there's not really much in the way of alternatives, that we do need to keep up our fund balances to pay for, what, the $3.8 million project, one project alone for this upcoming season. And we don't have $3.8 million sitting there in reserves, so therefore borrowing the money, bonding. So I know that I've even made comments about my own water bill of late, so, but the inevitable, my choices aren't any better, and there's not really a lot of choices, so, and we all need it, so it's a very necessary service, so. Does anybody in the room have an interest in making comment? Come on up. I remember you from a few months back. You were here, weren't you?
I was at the town hall meeting.
Right.
Okay, that's when it
Yeah.
was,
Yep.
okay.
Audrey Nelson, 250 61st Avenue Northeast. At that time, I brought up the fact, well, and other people did too, that those of us that are one-person household, and we're only using 4,000 gallons in a whole billing period, and then we get socked with this $50 sewer charge when we're using so much less than everybody else, and that we're being penalized. And at that time, during the town hall meeting, you said that you would take that under advisement. Well, guess not, huh?
Well,
Or
you have
what
to
did you
recall
come
that
up
we're
with?
going away from just the user fee. I understand where you're coming from. Since
Yeah.
you're a small user, you'd say, why don't I get a little bit better break, so charge more for the gallonage of water intake or the sewage. But that model has proved to be so unstable. So we need to have a basis of income to support the water and sewer, because the infrastructure is expensive, and here in Fridley, it's aging considerably. So we can't make it on usage, and it fluctuates so poorly, so it's so up and down. So one comment I'll make to you, I'm reminded of the city of Fridley residents and businesses collectively are using 22% less water over the last 6 years. So it's not stable. Great that we're all conserving. That's just wonderful. But on the other hand, we're not getting enough for income because of the reduction of water sold. So we find it very unstable. So we've gone to a higher base rate. Yes, the small users, but the basis is still there for everybody. And you still get some benefit because you're not paying you don't use as much water, so your bill is ultimately lower. But the base rate has gone up considerably. And as you see from the charts, we don't have a lot of control, especially over the sewer where you say it went up from the $50 as a basis. We don't have control over 3/4 of that. Over 70% of it goes elsewhere to take our sewage, the Met Council. Now, I'm not criticizing the Met Council because the alternatives would be a lot more expensive. And the rates are going up considerably with the Met Council. What was it earlier? There's so many numbers and percentage. Wasn't it 9 point?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yes, the Met Council has advised us that they're gonna increase their fees by 9.2% for, the fiscal year beginning 2019.
And we don't have any control over that.
Right, and I
So,
understand that.
I understand your
But I'm coming
point.
from my own personal perspective that I think the $50 base charge for sewer gives me, what, 12,000 is it 12,000 gallons that?
I don't remember, was it 8,000 or 12,000?
Mr. Mayor, members, council, 8,000, yes, that's
It's
correct.
8,000.
Right.
And I'm not, I'm using the same amount of water. So that's what I don't understand. And so, okay, so if you have to do that, then how come you can't offer those of us that are low income, some type of discount or, with proof or something like that?
Don't know that we would lower the base for those with, that are low water users. We might, I don't know, we'd have to look at just dropping the thousands of gallons used or create another level for the 4,000 gallon. There's not a lot of you. I mean, I wish I was in that bracket. I mean, I complain because my water bill in the last quarter was over $500. And there's 2 in my house.
Yeah, well, I don't water
So-
my lawn either, so.
Well, I do
You know.
water my lawn, I will admit, so.
I'm just saying, I conserve. There's other people that conserve, and then we're being punished by not using the maximum. I know what I'm trying to say. I didn't have a whole lot of time to even think about this when I found out that this was on the agenda tonight.
Mr. Mayor, is it, I guess I look at my gas bill, my electric bill, there's a base rate too, and let's think about that. We still have to maintain all of our wells, right? We have to make sure, and any well project that we have is expensive. We're an older city, we have lift stations, they all have to be maintained, whether you're running water down them all the time or not as much, and the mayor's running a lot more water down that same drain, but we still have to maintain that main infrastructure. So I think that it's, no matter what our rates would be, I think if the base rate was changed to 45, if you did X amount, like 200 versus, or 2,000 versus 4,000, there still has to be some base rate because we still have to maintain all that infrastructure, and it's huge. I mean, it's, I don't know, how many miles how many lift stations do we have? How many miles of sewer do we have? I mean, it's incredible, and I think you hear that from the people that go away in the wintertime too. Well, while they're gone, the sewers still have to be there, and we still have to have the lift stations, we still have to have water running through. So, I mean, it's a difficult cycle, and I think we're trying to be as conservative as we can. So, Mr. Kozlucher, maybe you wanna address that a little bit more?
It comes down to affordability for a lot of us, you know. And I'm not talking about just myself. There's other people in the community too. That it's about affordability, and $10 can make a big difference. And you start adding up those $10, it makes a big difference.
But,
in how
but do we
in
give
one's
you
quality of life.
But do we give you such a reduced rate that people that are in the next level pay more? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying
Well,
to get my head
I don't know
around
either.
it too.
I don't know. I
Yep.
don't have any suggestions. I'm just letting you know what my concerns are and how this affects me.
Right.
I understand.
Okay.
We understand.
Fair enough.
Jim?
Your
Mr. Mayor,
Honor, I
Councilmember Volcom, I'll just say that, it's, I think the mayor points out that a lot of this is due to conservation and reduction in usage over the past years, and that creates a shift in the cost apportionment, whether the council addresses it with changing the rate structure or, kind of modernizing the rate structure or not. You will have folks that, save in one instance and folks that, bear the expense in another instant just because of a reduction in use in different rate classes. And so I think council has taken the step, due to the, to try to make the rates more sustainable by increasing the base fee on sewer specifically, where sewer doesn't rely on metered quantities and so on and so forth. It's available to, the theory is it's available to every resident, every business in the community, whether you use it or not. The pipe is there, the pipe's ready to carry what you send its way.
And those rates are also based on not the summer, it's based on winter rates or winter water usage also, correct?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Holcomb, that's correct. And so, whether you occupy your home or not, the sewer is available to you. And I think that's part of the philosophy of shifting toward a little more of the base fee with the sanitary sewer versus the water, still being pushed in the direction of consumption. And I will also state that Mr. Tinter's presentation outlines the fact that that base rate specifically is being held at 0 increase for next year. We're still new in this rate structure too. We don't have a full year under our belt yet at this point. So I think we're being cautious about adjusting that upward at this point, but we're still kind of in evaluation mode for, what this structure does.
Good point.
Mr. Weishaupt?
Your Honor, I just want to say that we do take the concerns that were expressed at the meeting back in the spring, and our staff did review the analysis that was done by the consultant, and we took those things into consideration. The result may not be the way people or yourself wanted it to be, but we did look at it to make sure, as we promised, that it was doing what it's supposed to do, and that is protect the overall financial health of the system. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. Thanks.
We get it, we understand, to a
Well,
point.
next time you have a big meeting about this, remember me, would you please?
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And big meaning, you mean like the next time we talk about rate structure?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I hope we'll have another town meeting again here in the future
think we
to
will.
explain that, so.
And you're welcome to join us whenever you want at council. Just keep in tune when these items come up on an agenda, so. Okay. Any other questions? We have discussed this at quite length, and just earlier tonight, and again, so. If there's no other questions, no other discussion, a motion would be in order.
Mr. Mayor, if it's so in order, I move a resolution providing for water, sewer, stormwater, and recycling rate changes for 2019, found on pages 93, 94. And would you like to include the attachment on page 95?
Sure, if you want to, you go right ahead.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. No further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just one more quick question. I don't know if it's Mr. Weishaupt or who. So what, do you anticipate we'll have a year behind us soon that we'll be looking again, say, within 6 months to look at this structure and see if we're at, or do you think it'll take another year for us to look at it? Will we go back to our consultants again to have further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Bolcom, so we can certainly do the review and the analysis at any time. So if the council would like to see that information again in 6 months, that's certainly possible. We can certainly discuss it again with Ellers and get their input. Of course, if we involve them to a certain extent, there may be some additional cost that comes along with that. But regardless of when the council may ask for an additional review, the rates are always reviewed on an annual basis. So there will always be an opportunity, at least annually, to discuss the rates, their changes, the factors that influence them, et cetera.
I mean, would it be beneficial to look at it in 6 months? Will we have any more information than we have now? I mean, as far
Yeah,
as,
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Bolcom, yes, it would be beneficial as, at this point in time, our analysis has only been through the first 10 months of the rate
Right.
structure, so we don't have, excuse me, a full year worth of billing. So reviewing it after the end of the year, after those billings have gone out, would provide us with a fuller picture. As discussed during the conference meeting when we reviewed the information, what we have prepared to date is an extrapolation of that last quarter. And so, once we have that actual information, it would be beneficial to review it.
thank you.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. If there's no other discussion, I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, and the motion carries. Under new business, item number 9, a resolution authorizing the donation of real property to the city of Fridley by Ralcorp Frozen Bakery Products.
They go on when you walk out there. Don't they? Do they come on? Yeah. Any second now. Okay. How's that coming from, Brian?
Mr. Mayor and Council,
Do they have to jump up and down?
I'll start.
We're just worried about those people in the dark out there. Okay.
Yeah, Scott went out there.
Part of our 5% reduction goal.
Sorry.
Okay.
We're getting our 20% reduction, huh?
That's right, we're trying to get to 20% by 2030. So I just want to brief the council on this property donation. By and large, the city attorney, Jay Karlovich, has carried the ball on this and, provided the information that you see in the packet. So the subject property was required for the city of Fridley to construct a stormwater pond as part of the Oakland Creek Pond expansion project that began in 2017. At that time, we'd advised that staff at Ralcorp, also known as Treehouse Foods, the business name is Treehouse Foods locally, that the city of Fridley would accept a donation of the subject property if they preferred over an easement. And part of that was because they were working well with us to donate the property so that we could accomplish the project. Treehouse Foods has since requested that the parcel be donated to the city after we established the easement last fall. And that was a matter of timing, really. It would have been it's a much longer process to have the property donated, and we needed to get the project underway, so the easement was established first. Treehouse Foods provided the requisite title work for the city attorney at their cost, and the city attorney developed the attached agreement and accompanying resolution that conveys the property to the city of Fridley. And the resolution also approves execution of an access agreement in favor of the city of Fridley, so we can basically get to the location of the pond. And so staff is recommending that the city council move to approve that attached resolution authorizing the donation of real property to the city by Ralcorp Frozen Bakery Products Incorporated. And it's pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 465.03. And if approved, we'll notify Treehouse Foods of the approval, and we'll have documents fully executed and recorded. Dan, if you could do one more. This is just an aerial view. On the bottom center is the Treehouse Foods manufacturing facility. And in the circled area, you can see actually the pond under construction. This photo was probably taken in fall of 2017. There's actually some equipment out there, and mainly kind of the outline of the expanded pond is there. The parcel on the left side of the circle, that kind of wedge-shaped parcel, the city did own that. And so our easement and our subsequent deeded parcel is in that kind of square piece to the east in the circle. And Dan, if you hit one more button there, that kind of shows the easement area that's currently being donated under this agreement to the city of Fridley. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kozlitzer. Does the council have any questions? Was it to their advantage, I suppose, to donate it because it takes it off the tax roll then? I mean, was there some advantage for the rail court?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think that may be part of their thought process. We're not absolutely sure about that, you know, and what the tax advantage might be for the donation. Obviously, you know, there might be an ability to claim that. I think the one other factor was the fact that the pond exists, the city will be maintaining it. I think it makes a cleaner, you know, from an insurance perspective, they don't have to insure the parcel, you know, against, you know, a hazard or somebody, you know, having a problem down there, and the city obviously would be doing that regardless. And so I think there's a couple of reasons from a business standpoint that it makes sense. I do know that, like, as far as an appraisal, we had talked about that, and, you know, the acreage was not, you know, appraised, you know, to have substantive value to them, so they weren't doing it for that reason. But I do think it makes it a little bit cleaner, and, you know, I think that's why in the past, the city had purchased the wedge-shaped parcel for a smaller pond at one time.
Would they be willing to donate a little bit more property so that we could expand the pond? Because I'm not certain the pond is big enough yet. Of course, it could never be big enough for all rain events, but.
Mr. Mayor, our goal is to combine with some additional improvements that we're actually in the budget for 2019, some lesser improvements that will be able to allow them to bear the 100-year storm without having water inside their building. So they are the low property along this portion of Oakland Creek subwatershed, and so they do get flooded out first, if anybody does, and so that's the goal. And so, you know, I think we will be able to achieve that goal with the pond that we have in place, and then, like I said, the kind of the conveyance improvement that we're anticipating next year.
I suppose it's not practical for them to put in a green roof or maybe impervious or pervious type asphalt system in their parking lots to absorb more water?
Mr. Mayor, upon retrofit, I'm sure they'd entertain that.
Sure. Okay.
So it's so in order to move a resolution authorizing the donation of real property to the city by Railcorp Frozen Bakery Products Incorporated pursuant to Minnesota statutes 465.03 found on pages 97 and 98.
Second.
Is there any final discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed? And the motion also carries, which leads us to informal status reports. Does the staff or council have anything to report to the viewing, listening audience?
Well, I think we want to thank everyone that came to our open house and dedication, and all the staff that participated, and all the people that came forward and got a chance to tour this beautiful building, so.
Yes, I think it was a larger success than maybe some would have expected. I've heard as high as 1,000 people were here, and I know that some people didn't actually make the event, drove by, saw that they had to park 3 blocks away, so they decided to leave. But I guess I call that a big success when somewhere's up towards 1,000 people showed up for an open house, so.
On a very cold day.
Yeah, pretty cool. But I want to thank all those people for taking the initiative to come out, and hope they all enjoyed the tour, and don't be strangers. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, just a reminder, the Fridley Police Association has collected coats and mittens and hats for kids in need in Fridley, and we'll be giving them out this Saturday from 10 to 1 in our gathering room here at the new City Hall.
And they can just stop by, right? They don't have to.
Correct.
And just to note along that, the Fridley History Center this Saturday on December 1st is having a open house, and it is about police and fire, the history of the police and fire department. And I assume that there'll be some members of the public safety department there.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
And that is from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So come out and enjoy.
Yeah, if there's nothing further, I would move that we adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, the motion carries. Thank you for attending or watching your city council. Good evening.
Hey, Wally, what's that motor running?
I gotta work on that.